microbial growth is a competitor for oxygen. And so if you have too many microorganisms growing, then you're going to have discoloration due to microbial spoilage. The color that they really need to worry about is the natural color that has nothing to do with microbial growth.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform dedicated to sharing breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the meats industry. On each episode, we will hear from meat specialists and professionals to talk about numerous topics in meat science. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, UltraSource, the new standard for innovation. Viscofan is a global leader and innovative partner in the food industry who provides solutions for the casing market.
IFA, slaughter and meat processing tools.
Hello, me folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. Today, we are at K-State, back to my second home. And I've been asking one of I consider my mentors on meat color. One of my last phase of my doctorate, it was on meat color because I found to be a very important factor for the meat industry, but also for consumers and some of the misconceptions that they may have. Welcome, Dr. Melvin Hunt, and for your friends, Hunter.
Yes.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes. Well, it's great to be here, and there's nothing more than I'd rather do than talk about meat color.
And as a matter of fact, I just asked you, like when we were discussing, do you know something about meat color so we can discuss?
Well, I think we need to know, why is meat red? Why is meat turned brown? And why does the meat industry at almost every level have so many problems with meat color? That's what we'll talk about today.
Because at the end of the day, you have control over a lot of the factors that can impact color. Yeah. It translates into money, right? The economics. So that's why it's very important to know meat color.
It is, as long as it is an issue, and as long as consumers look for a certain color of product, they need to know a little of the science behind meat color. And that involves basically a simple triangle, which we call a meat color triangle. And if you start at the very beginning and you slice into meat that has never been exposed to air, it's kind of a purplish red color. And if you don't watch very soon, it starts to change to bright red color. The purple red color we say is deoxymyoglobin, meaning that there's no oxygen in that muscle. Then it starts to bloom, turn bright red, it oxygenates, and that's really the color that most people prefer, depending on the type of package that the meat is in. Now, the other question then is, well, because in every plant that harvests meat and fabricates meat, they slice it open for the first time, they seed the deoxymyoglobin, the purple-red color, and then it turns bright red. And then how does it go back to the purple-red color? And that is the next series of interactions, the color chemistry, that are extremely important. Because the purple-red color deoxy has no oxygen bound to the myoglobin molecule. Myoglobin is the red-colored substance in meat. And when it blooms, it turns bright red, just like Mother Nature made it to do. And then it gives up that oxygen to the components that generate energy inside of a muscle cell. Once the oxygen blooms, and at sea level, there's about 21% oxygen in the air. When that is reduced down to about 1 to 3%, it turns brown all by itself. Most people probably in the meat industry have seen that. If they've made some hamburger patties, you make the patties, stack one on top of the other, another on the other, put it back in the refrigerator, and then when it comes time to put it on the grill, they come back and they take them apart and say, whoa, that's brown. How did it get to be brown? Well, Mother Nature equipped that muscle chemistry to metabolize some of the oxygen, and when it gets down to a low percent, it turns brown all by itself. That's the easy part. That happens no matter what we do. The question then becomes, because that brown pigment is called met myoglobin. The difference between major difference between met myoglobin and oxy and deoxymyoglobin is that the iron that's in the myoglobin molecule can be reduced, the two good guys, versus the bad guy, met myoglobin, is an oxidized. So I think people need to understand, if they're going to try to solve problems with color, is that they need to know the difference between oxygenation and oxidation. So it oxidizes, the iron changes from a +2 to a +3. It lost one electron. And to get that electron back into the myoglobin molecules, we have to reduce the met myoglobin. The chemistry is called met myoglobin reducing activity. And the other thing that you must do is take the oxygen down from about 1 to 3% down to essentially 0. That's less oxygen than the amount of oxygen that's in the atmosphere on top of Mount Everest. That is not easy to do, but muscle can do it easily if you have the right series of reactions and factors affecting it. And so if they fabricate the meat the first time and then put it in a vacuum package, suck all the air out of it, form a vacuum seal, and as long as it's not a leaker, it will, and if the temperature is right, it will go from purple to bright red to brown and back to purple. That is the key that everyone needs to know to be able to try to control meat color problems. Now, the other thing that goes along with that is the fact that not all muscles do that the same. And we can maybe talk about that a bit later.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. I'm beyond excited, and I hope I control myself, because I have like 15 questions for you, but we're not going to go over each of them. But I think following up on the oxygen concentration in the vacuum bag, sometimes I see some folks, especially in the industry, for the packaging industry, and you taught me this. Whenever you're going to start your vacuum machine, and you can tell the audience about what you do, you check the pressure on the vacuum chamber.
Right.
Tell me about that, please.
Well, if you put the meat in a bag and put it in the vacuum chamber, the first things it does is it evacuates the air out of the vacuum chamber. And since there's also air trapped in that bag, it kind of comes up and forms a balloon around it.
They have a tool.
Yeah.
You remember the tool that we have upstairs?
Yeah.
That way, if there is in a certain range, you see, okay, you had to be within this range for you to see this vacuum chamber.
Because in order to get the oxygen down to a low enough content, is that you've got to have a high partial pressure of oxygen removal. And that requires good vacuum pumps. And a lot of times in the industry, sometimes they try to package things too fast and run them through too soon before they actually draw enough air out of the bag, and it doesn't then fully convert from that brown color met myoglobin back to the reduced deoxymyoglobin color.
Would you recommend using the tool? What's the name of the tool you
Well,
you
it was just a little oxygen concentration gauge, and you can put that in a bag, send it through your vacuum packager, and see what the partial pressure is. And if it's low enough, well, then that's when they're going to get the most desired color conversion. If it's lower than that, it's going to be difficult.
I think that's a good recommendation. We have a lot of our audience and listenership is small and mid-sized meat processors who run a lot of cycles during the day.
Yep.
And that might be a good recommendation. Get a vacuum or this pressure gauge to kind of know what kind of the range your machine is to optimize
And
meat color.
because if their machine does not have the capability, and sometimes small processors don't have the latest, newest, best equipped vacuum pumps, then they may not be able to get as much air out as they really would like. And even that, they may be very successful just by knowing some of the other things that are in there. Because people always in the meat industry, they think you need to have excellent cold chain management. Keep it cold, low microbial growth, and get it in a bag and get it cold and freeze it if you wanted to again. But if you do that, and if the meat is too cold, the color chemistry doesn't run. It's kind of like when you are out shoveling snow off of the sidewalk and your hands get cold, they don't work like they used to. And when you got gloves on and it's warm, so you have to have warm chain management to go along with the cold chain management. That is the key that most of them maybe need to focus on. Is that how long do I need? Because we're talking about surface color. We're not talking about color all the way through. A big chunk of meat, it's just a millimeter or two deep. And so they need to just allow that to warm up enough just to get the color chemistry to run. That's the warm chain management.
I like that you mentioned surface discoloration, surface color. How do you relate the color on the surface to microbial growth? Because there's a lot of misconception, like, okay, what's the relationship between color? And I know with Dr. Ramnathan, we talk about this, but what is your take on this?
Well, I mean, microbial growth is a competitor for oxygen. And so if you have too many microorganisms growing, then you're going to have discoloration due to microbial spoilage. The color that they really need to worry about is the natural color that has nothing to do with microbial growth. That's why we have so many problems sometimes, is that people can't get around spoilage versus the normal color chemistry that occurs on the surface of the meat. In fact, if you look at, they take a bloom steak that has been exposed to oxygen, and then they slice it and look at it. They can see a red layer on the top. Just below that, where the oxygen comes down, it gets from 20, 18, 15, down to 1 to 2%, and it's brown. There's a brown layer in there, and the rest of the bulk of the meat is purple. So that's just a neat little thing that they could try to see. And so if it's so cold that meat won't change color, or as in a retail display case, the brown color after 6 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever, and by 12 hours it may work the way up, and the brown discoloration occurs on the surface of the displayed product.
Next question, and it's following up on this, and I apologize, it will become a little bit more technical on this, but we have to talk about the why. Could you please tell us, before we go into the muscle biochemistry between different muscles, can we talk a little bit about mitochondria, NADH, and the relationship between for that and meat color, and then we can jump on.
Well, the mitochondria is a little subcellular organism in every single cell in our bodies. It generates energy metabolism, and they have to have NADH and some of those chemical compounds that, for instance, if an athlete is playing soccer and they get a cramp in their leg, then their muscles it tightens up and they can hardly stand it. And yet somebody comes out and they rub their leg for a while, give it a little time, and they let the oxygen get back in to where they can say it doesn't contract anymore, and they can be up and off and going. So there's some very practical applications there in terms of, is there myoglobin reducing activity? Have you momentarily cut off the oxygenated blood supply? But after we harvest animals, their blood supply is basically gone. Some other people also think that meat color is due to blood, but in most harvest operations around the world, why, when they harvest an animal and they remove most of the blood, they'll get 95% out of the blood. So there may be a little bit left in some of those very fine capillaries, and that really is, blood is not the issue. It's myoglobin control that is the issue.
The mission of USMEF is to increase the value and profitability of the U.S. beef, pork, and lamb industries by enhancing demand for their products in export markets through a dynamic partnership of all stakeholders. Simply put, USMEF is putting U.S. meat on the world's table.
The biochemistry within the carcass, in terms of muscle,
Yes.
or muscle biochemistry is not the same. So we talk about locomotion muscles versus support muscles, and we can talk about more specific between the psoas major and the longissimus lumbar
We
muscle.
could use that. That's a good example, because the longissimus goes up and down the vertebral column, and that muscle, the longissimus muscle, it's the biggest, longest muscle in the carcass. It's also one of the most color stable muscles because it does some work. And in the locomotion of the animal, and the forelegs, and same way down in the forequarter and in the hindquarter. And so those cells are made and equipped with the right type of chemistry to metabolize oxygen and cause motion in an animal. But when we lose that in a carcass, then it loses that ability to maintain a certain amount of NADH. They start to metabolize their glycogen, which is converted into glucose, which eventually is converted into lactic acid, and the lactic acid causes the pH of the muscle to go down. And so the normal pH of muscle in a normal critter, if they haven't been excited, if they haven't been stressed before slaughter, their muscle pH will be about 5.6, 5.7. If it gets to be 6, then it's a little darker color. If it gets to be 6.4, 6.5, it's going to be basically unacceptable to most consumers. And it also, since it has a higher pH, it will have greater microbial storage potential, spoilage potential, because of the higher pH is more favorable to microbial growth.
And that's a different topic that
Yep.
we'll like to get back to that. And I wanted to touch on your mentors that have helped you become who you are professionally, as a person. And we have to talk about Dr. Kraft. That I got the opportunity I got here in 2016 to still see him in the hallway sometimes.
Yep.
and say hi to him.
Well, Dr. Groff was my undergraduate, and when I was an undergraduate student, he was my advisor. He was my judging team coach, and he became an honored mentor. And it just so happened that he was very interested in meat color. And my master's project and PhD projects also dealt with meat color. And so everything that goes on in my career had to deal with an individual who really liked to teach undergraduate and graduate students, and to make them be aware of the industry-related problems with meat color. So he was a real color guru, and I wish I could even be close to what he was.
No, you just a lot of the future of research in meat color is because of what you and Dr. Kraft have developed and conducted, and we see here on our side a lot of master's theses and dissertations that you guys have.
Well, and the other thing is that Dr. Kraft and I worked upon is in the early 1990s there was an outbreak of E. coli 157H7, a pathogen that you do not want to fool with. And that occurred in an outbreak of in some hamburger it served in a company that was out on the West Coast. And that got us then into, well, why did this happen, or why does that? And we discovered that despite all these things that we do, if you have meat of a certain color and you cook it, it's what happens on the interior part of the meat that you don't see that is important. And we found a situation whereby you could cook meat to a certain low temperature, and depending upon what the redox form was in the center of the meat, it would be brown, prematurely brown, at a temperature too low to kill pathogens. And it did on several people.
What was the impact of that?
The impact was that the premature browning, if you're going to cook meat and you're going to have your friends over, you need to use a thermometer to measure the internal temperature to be 160 for 1 second, and you can be safe to eat and ignore whatever color it is. It could be brown, it could be slightly pink. If I see meat and I'm cooking on a grill and I have the friends coming over for dinner, if it is brown on the inside, I'm worried. If it is pink on the inside, I feel safe. So it really, that's just why do we have, that's just an example of what Dr. Croft helped figure out, is that how could that be? But if it's met myoglobin on the inside, you're not going to expect it to turn pink when you cook it, because normally it gets browner as you go up in internal temperature. So, rule of thumb, always measure the temperature of a steak, of a roast, of ground beef, ground pork, ground lamb, whatever.
So, Dr. Hunt, we were discussing about the legacy that Dr. Croft and you are living the industry. A lot of good concepts, fundamentals, like it's serving or will serve as a groundwork for future research in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And as a matter of fact, when I had the opportunity to work I had the opportunity to do an internship at Hy-Vee in the meat department, and in my some of the conversations that I had on the podcast, I've talked about this, and I was able to experience some of the reasons why meat is wasted or thrown away at the retail level. And it is a lot of money. I mean, in the beginning of the episode, we talked meat color. If you can manage meat color, it's going to save you money in the long run. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the meat wasted was because it started having discoloration on the surface. And just a normal consumer, when you see some... let me get back and step back a little bit. If you go you consider 95% in the U.S. it's aerobic. Like I said, all the meat is displayed aerobically with oxygen, the meat exposed to oxygen. And we talk about this. We will learn from you that oxygen will eventually oxidize the surface of meat, of fresh meat.
And that is temperature dependent. Because if you want to slow down the enzymes that are metabolizing the oxygen, and you want a bright red surface myoglobin or oxymyoglobin, then the thing is to keep it as cold as it's cold. If you want the color to convert to purple, be an anaerobic package, then you've got to have a warm period in there to get the color chemistry to go from purple to red and go through that color conversion that we discussed earlier. It's one of the really neat things as part of my career was that I really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed research. I enjoyed, and probably for Dr. Croft, to do things that was important to the industry. And as long as we have consumers that are going to make decisions about purchasing meat based on color, then the industry really needs to try to bring themselves up to speed, if they aren't already, to know some of the factors that affect meat color and color stability.
I remember 3-4 years ago when I asked you about, I told you about my passion of meat color, but at the retail level, because I saw the amount of meat that was wasted, not only in one store, just generally speaking. And I think it's one of the last papers with Smith in 2000, which put like some of the amount of money that is wasted at the retail level for that.
Exactly.
It made me, or led me to develop the meta-analysis, which spent some hours going over some of the research that you conducted in the last years. And we maybe can talk about the discoloration. So the psoas major, the tenderloin, you cut some steaks, and on the other side you have some ribeyes or some strip loins. You cut them into steaks. You have to expect some lifespan difference in terms of color life that you like to color.
Exactly, because that psoas major or filet mignon, tenderloin muscle, it's on one side of the vertebra, and just opposite that is the longissimus muscle, and it has a color stable versus a color labile. And so that's where I think the industry may need to know or to recognize is that those two muscles are made to do different things in a living animal, and they're going to perform differently in a retail case. And so the tenderloin muscle will probably discolor long before the longissimus does. And so that's time maybe they take that top loin muscle off and they sell the tenderloin by itself. And you don't notice that color disparity as much.
So it's a big example, like a T-bone or porterhouse.
Oh, exactly.
You run it through the bandsaw, display it, and maybe in the next couple days or in a day, you see the tenderloin piece of it start to discolor.
Yep.
While the longissimus or the strip loin side is still red. So you're losing the consumers so consumers will buy with their eyes. So they don't like that, they won't buy it.
Exactly. Yeah. So because that becomes then merchandising as far as the retail stores are concerned, is that how can we minimize those comebacks, or they rearrange the display case looking for one that's got the best color, and color uniformity usually is an important criteria.
We're gonna almost wrapping up this episode. I wanted to ask you about your current role at MSA. What are some of the responsibilities and your work that you're doing right now? And we think about a professor emeritus that, okay, you're not going to do anything. You just, but you're so active. And you come to Weber Hall, like a couple days, 3 days a week, or maybe every day. Yep. So I like, what keeps you moving?
Well, I like being around people. I like to problem solve. And sometimes it's just, and particularly with meat meetings, there's an International Congress of Meat Science and Technology somewhere in the world. We've been to probably 20 of those outside the United States.
Which ones?
Oh.
Which countries have you been in?
Japan, South Korea, Taiwan,
Ireland,
Canada, Ireland, Norway, Belgium, Germany, France. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
So Meat Color has bring you to many countries.
And you know what is that some of these people have read a manuscript or a book that we wrote on why, stabilizing the color of myoglobin. And that, I don't know, we kind of fell into that. And Rich Mancini was one of my graduate students, and that is the most widely cited manuscript that I have ever been a part of.
How many citations so far?
I mean, we've done that numerous times.
We'll put it on the. Yeah. But it's to be proud. I mean, it just.
Well, it is. It's been kind of at the right place at the right time with the right interest, and There are other important parts of the meat industry. You could talk about tendency, talk about efficiency of live animal production and interfacing and different nutritional regimens and that sort of thing. And meat color was just kind of my
Baby.
baby.
What's for Dr. Hunt in the following 5 years? What do you want to do? Do you conduct more research? Do you want to do, what's your...
I think if there's any contribution that I could make for young people coming into the industry, and even some of the older ones who are still there, that is to, if they have color questions, I'm really, I can go to a poster at a meeting, and I can stay there forever and talk about meat color. It's a real privilege.
Well, thank you for being here.